My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. This is the only channel dedicated to UFC picks and DraftKings lineups run by professional fighters and MMA insiders. Every week, I join Nick Newell, professional fighter, professional model, and ESPN Top 10 guest, along with Dan Kramer, UFC fighter, Bellator fighter, Ultimate Fighter alumni, and Jacob Lyons, a skinny kid from Indiana. And we break down every single fight, the betting odds, the DraftKings picks, and we set you up for success. This weekend, we have a very exciting Bellator 255 card, but it doesn't stop there. We have exciting Bellator cards coming up week after week for the next few months. So Nick and I are going to break down our top 6 upcoming Bellator fights. We have some rematches, we have some title fights, we have some tournament fights, and it's all very exciting. As you know, Nick is an active roster Bellator fighter, so he's bringing a special kind of insight to this. So let's go ahead and walk through. We are going to start with PATRICIO Pitbull versus Emmanuel Sanchez. This fight is this coming Friday. So at Bellator 255, this is a rematch. This is a title fight. PATRICIO Pitbull is one of the most dominant fighters that the sport has ever seen, let alone just Bellator. How do you think this goes? I mean, both of them have looked fantastic lately, but do you think this is more of the same, or do you think Emmanuel Sanchez has a legitimate shot here?
I mean, even if it is more of the same, these odds are crazy because the last fight was close. It came down to the 5th round, and PATRICIO Pitbull pulled through. In the first round, Emmanuel Sanchez dropped him. A lot of people don't know that because they just see that Pitbull won the fight overall. But you look at momentum, and everyone is riding high on Pitbull. He might be the #1 featherweight in the world. A lot of people are saying that. I know I was supposed to fight on the same card as him, and his coach absolutely lost his mind, saying he's the best. He trains all these guys. He trains Triple C. He trains all these guys, and PATRICIO Pitbull is the best fighter that he has. And he said that, and he's the coach of all these guys. So he said it right in front of his other guys. So, I mean, you go off of who he's beat. So his last fight, he absolutely wiped out Pedro Carvalho. Not even a very competitive fight against a very good fighter. The fight before that, he won a 5-round decision against Juan Archuleta, who's the 135-pound champ, and pretty much controlled that fight start to finish. Juan had his moments, but that was all PATRICIO Pitbull in that fight overall. And then you go back another fight, and he knocked out Michael Chandler, who's the 155-pound #1 contender in the UFC. Everyone's big on Michael Chandler. Bellator will not stop sharing PATRICIO Pitbull knocking him out now that he's in the UFC. And I guess that's their right to do that. He did it, and he's riding high as possibly the best featherweight fighter in the world, maybe one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And the guy that he's fighting, Emmanuel Sanchez, is also riding an insane amount of momentum. So the last time they fought, Pitbull won. It was close. Another loss that Emmanuel Sanchez had was Daniel Weichel. Emmanuel Sanchez rematched him and beat the brakes off of him. So to say that he hasn't improved is crazy. The one thing that I really like about this fight is both men are moving forward constantly. Last time they fought, they were in each other's face fighting. It was one of the best fights not only the best featherweight fights I've ever seen, one of the best, most entertaining fights I've ever seen. Emmanuel Sanchez started off well. He was moving forward the whole time, not really fighting like a tall guy, but also using his reach well in the fight. And eventually PATRICIO Pitbull got his timing and was able to kind of counter by slipping and ripping inside and also moving forward and keeping it in close. But Emmanuel Sanchez held his own. Going into this fight, the thing that I think it will be very similar to the last fight. I definitely don't think it's a blowout. If I had money, I would put it on Emmanuel Sanchez at these odds. If it was 50-50 odds, I would pick Pitbull probably because he won the first fight and he's been absolutely on fire, just beating everyone, coasting, not even losing rounds lately. He's been winning every single round that he's in and knocking people out. So he's got a lot of momentum in here. I'm really a huge fan of Emmanuel Sanchez and his striking and his body shots. I think his jiu-jitsu is amazing. I wouldn't be surprised if Patricio Pitbull took it to the ground often, and Sanchez isn't necessarily the most eager guy to get back up. He works on his back and has actually been very successful at submitting people in the past. And it should be an interesting fight, and it should be razor close. I don't think that it's going to be a blowout by any means.
So you're essentially what you're saying is, if you think Pitbull probably wins, but these odds are crazy, and you throw $100 at plus 250 odds on Emmanuel Sanchez, who, dropped Pitbull in their first fight, lost a very close decision that came down to the last round.
And he's looked absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Patricio Pitbull has too, and he's just a little fire hydrant of a man. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if he used more wrestling in this fight and got more takedowns and kind of controlled it that way. Emmanuel Sanchez is just, these two could be top 5 in the world at 145. And I'm not just talking about in Bellator. I'm talking about everywhere, every 145 pounder in the world. So this is a very interesting fight. I would say that Patricio Pitbull is the favorite to win, and I would agree with that. But the one that I would throw money at if I was going to bet would be Emmanuel Sanchez.
Well, it'll be a fun one, and that's this Friday, April 2nd. So just in a few days. The next fight that we're excited for is another rematch. We have Ryan Bader versus Lyoto Machida 2. And this one is at Bellator 256, April 9th. So next week. This is an exciting one because I'll let you do your breakdown, but obviously this is a rematch. Lyoto Machida won the first rematch by strikes. Their careers have taken sort of different paths since then. And Ryan Bader has reinvented himself in Bellator. He's just, at one point he was a champ. He's looked fantastic. He's sort of gone back to who he was as a fighter. And he's the big time favorite here. And I feel like that's pretty solid. I think he should be, even though he was stopped their first go out. What are your thoughts here? I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Bader's a completely different fighter. I've seen Lyoto's been working hard. I've seen he's been getting some work in with Glover Teixeira and kind of going down that path and working with some really high level guys. So that's a thing, especially with Bader coming off a pretty bad loss, and Lyoto's losses have been pretty close. I mean, his fight versus Mousasi was close, and his fight versus Phil Davis was actually really, really close. So Lyoto Machida kind of went on a little bit of a skid himself and came to Bellator, and things kind of turned around. So he's been doing pretty great lately. Even in defeat, he's looked good, and he's looked a little resurged, but he's older. He's a little bit older. I think he might be even 40 years old. I'm not sure, maybe 39, 40, or in his 40s. But Ryan Bader had one bad performance against NEMKOV. He got caught. But outside of that, he's looked absolutely amazing, knocking out Fedor, knocking out King Mo, beating Matt Mitrione. He was absolutely mauling Czech Congo when they fought. So I would say that Bader would be the favorite in this fight. I do not think he'll be able to take Machida down, is actually an interesting thing. I think that Machida is one of the hardest guys to take down, really awkward with his sideways stance and really good at scrambling up and getting back to his feet. I think that it will be a pretty close fight, but then Bader's going to land a power shot and kind of take over from there.
Yeah, that's interesting. You think he won't take him down. And you're right. Lyoto Machida is famous for his karate style stance and in and out movements and just the awkwardness that he brings to any fight. I think some of that has worn off, meaning I think people are used to it now. They know what to expect. Some people have figured it out. They've timed it, or at least they're not so intimidated by it, which is why he went from, the UFC champ somewhat of a skid there. And I think it's because people sort of figured out that style. With that being said, you're right. He pops right back up if he does get taken down. And even if you figured out his timing and his counter striking, because he's a giant counter striker, even if you figured out the timing and how to avoid the counter striking, taking him down is very hard when his legs are that far apart and in the stance that they're in, and his scrambling ability. So it will be a fun one. I think Ryan should take it down. Obviously, he's got more power. His chin is better at this point in their careers. But at the end of the day, Lyoto is so tricky with that counter striking and with that timing that it's not insane that he would catch Ryan rushing in at the wrong time. So another fun one. And this is next week, so we'll see what happens. Then we have Bellator 257 on April 16th. We have two fights on this card that we love. The first one is Corey Anderson. This is a tricky one. Versus Dovletzin Yagshimurov. That was my best go at it, buddy. It's not going to get much better than that. But anyway, this is another interesting fight. Corey Anderson, famously left UFC on, I don't want to say bad terms. He didn't leave. He wasn't cut because he sucked. He decided, I'm going to get some better pay somewhere else. He's still one of the best people on the planet. And this is a very interesting fight. This is a good fight. I'm looking forward to this fight. And this, I think, is his, a real test for him in Bellator to see what Corey Anderson can do, to see if he should be fighting for a title, and to see sort of where he sits in that crowded division. And this is arguably Bellator's best division outside of 145. But what are your thoughts here? Do you think Corey Anderson gets it done? Or do you think he's sort of, he's going to be in deep water early on in his Bellator career?
Man, this one is tough because Dovletzin is a pretty athletic guy. He moves really well. When he throws with a lot of power. He gets low and he whips that overhand. And it's not just like sloppy street fighting. It's really good timing. Lots of momentum, really puts his hips behind it. It's definitely his favorite strike from what I've seen. He has diversity in strikes, but the one thing that I would be worried about is that overhand. And he has shown wrestling chops in the past. With Corey Anderson, you get a little more conventional type fighter. He's a wrestler. He can box. He can kick too and do everything pretty well. But it's really like solid basics is the thing. And this is Dovletzin's first time in the big show. He's fought a lot of really good guys. He's a world champ over in Russia or out in that area. And he's coming in with a lot of momentum. Corey Anderson beat a lot of the best guys in the world. He has he knocked out Johnny Walker when Johnny Walker was hot. He has a win over Glover. A very good performance in a fight that I really thought he was going to lose. And he's been in there for a very long time fighting the best guys in the world and has a pretty good record, all things considered, even with those 5 losses for who he's fought. I think his gamesmanship is going to take over in this fight. I feel like Dovletzin will have his moments, but he'll get finished late by Corey Anderson.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So Corey is famously boring, if that makes any sense. And honestly, it's sort of unjust because he's not as boring as sort of his reputation dictates, because he is a wrestler. He's very wrestle heavy, wrestle first. But I feel like that sort of changed. He got labeled as a boring wrestler, but his last few fights, that really wasn't what happened. So I definitely am interested to see what happens here. I think he has some pressure on him, right? This is a big, lucrative contract. Bellator is an awesome promotion to fight for. A lot of people, think it's UFC or bust, and that is not the case. Bellator has a ton of viewers. They do a show every single week. They have great production value, and you can make really good money and get some really good matchups, both in, toughness, meaning get really hard matchups, but also fun matchups and exciting matchups. So, I feel like he has some pressure on him to come in here and, continue to do great things and really build himself up and give himself the opportunities that Ryan Bader has had and really turn himself into a superstar in that promotion. So It will be tricky. I mean, you mentioned it's Dovledzan's, Bellator debut and Big Show debut.
Yeah,
so I think they'll both. What'd you say?
Dovledzan Yagshimuradov.
We're just gonna let you say it.
Dovledzan Yagshimuradov. I have a Turkmenistan. He's a Turkmen fighter. I have a Turkmen fighter in my gym that I train with all the time, and I did not ask him this name, but he's pretty pumped up, and he's pretty big on this guy. He's really happy that someone from Turkmenistan is able to
made it to the Big Show.
Yeah, to come out and really make something. So if you ask Arslan, the guy I train with, who's gonna win, he said Turkmenistan, baby, number one.
Well, I definitely think it's closer. These odds are probably pretty accurate, and these are pretty close odds, especially if you just watch the last two fights we broke down. So I think the odds are accurate. I think it is a close fight, and I think they both have pressure. I mean, conventional wisdom would say that Corey doesn't have pressure, but I think he does. I mean, this is his sort of second shot. This is his rebirth, if you will, in a big time promotion with a lot of money behind them on a big network. They're moving to Showtime soon. So we'll see what happens. This will be a big one for them. On that same Bellator 257 card, we have VADIM NEMKOV versus Phil Davis. We talked about NEMKOV earlier. He beat Ryan Bader. He also beat Phil Davis. This is a rematch, but it was Phil Davis's last loss, and it was a split decision. So this is another very tricky fight, very close fight. And that's what we're breaking down here, our favorite matchups coming up. And this is one of them. And this is a stacked card. It's tricky. Do you think Phil Davis sort of takes that loss back and wins this fight and is back on that pile? Or, did that decision go the right way and it is what it is?
NEMKOV is a bad man. His fight versus Bader was one of the best performances of the year, maybe. A true breakthrough performance against a guy that was riding really, really high and was really hot. The difference you get with someone like Phil Davis and someone like Ryan Bader is, even though Bader may have beaten Phil Davis, I think a split decision twice, so it was a close fight. But Bader gets in there and he scraps and he throws hooks and he'll make it dirty. And Phil Davis is one shot at a time, two shots at a time, a kick, and unless he hurts you and then he builds some momentum, then he'll throw multiples. But he fights really well long and uses his reach very well. NEMKOV fights and tries to build that momentum. He's a little more diverse. He's good with his kicks. He masked that kick so well against Bader. And the one thing that he showed is that even though Phil Davis is an NCAA champion, he doesn't have a wrestling advantage in this fight. NEMKOV took him down multiple times, and it wasn't like NEMKOV was destroying him wrestling. Phil had his moments too. And but this is a sorry.
Well, that's
this is edit that out. So this is a close fight on paper. If you watch the last fight, many people thought Phil Davis won that fight. I say it was so close that it really didn't bother me either way. If the decision went to Davis or NEMKOV, it wouldn't have affected me. Obviously, coming off this riding this momentum, I would say that VADIM NEMKOV is the favorite. So most people are going to pick him to win. Maybe I feel like Phil Davis is so awkward and fights so well long that he was a little bit surprised by the wrestling in the first fight. I feel like it will be a different fight. Phil Davis will win this fight. It will be really close, but I think at those odds, I would also put money on him.
So I was going to ask you, what adjustments would Phil Davis have to do to win this fight, considering he lost the first one? You're basically saying the adjustments are be prepared for the wrestling, which he might not have expected the first time.
Yeah, I don't think he expected VADIM NEMKOV to be as good as he was.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And obviously, you mentioned Phil Davis is a decorated, very accomplished college wrestler, but we've sort of seen that in the past where sometimes being a great wrestler offensively, sort of, if you just take the wrestling to them, they can struggle at times. We've seen it back in the day with George St. Pierre versus Shawnee Hendricks. George St. Pierre was like, I don't care how good of a wrestler you are. I'm just going to come right at you and wrestle you. And sort of, we've seen some people get caught by that. So we'll see if Phil Davis makes those adjustments, if he's more prepared to be defensive in his wrestling, and we'll see what happens. But another fun fight. And this card specifically is stacked, Bellator 257. And we roll right into Bellator 258. We have 2 fights on this card as well that are fantastic. This is an awesome fight. We have Juan Archuleta versus Sergio Pettis. Obviously, Anthony Pettis' younger brother, but I would say the one with the better career right now. And he's looked fantastic recently. Juan Archuleta is a beast. And this is another really, really exciting fight. We don't have odds for this one yet. This fight's May 7th. But who do you think wins? And what odds would you throw here? Like, how close do you think this fight is?
I would guess.
And this is a title fight, mind you.
Yes, it is. It is for the title. I would guess that Juan Archuleta would be a pretty heavy favorite unless Pettis is riding off of his name. I think that Pettis has looked great lately. 135 might even be a better weight class for him than 125. He might have grown a little bit, and really 125 just kind of sucked the life out of him, and he's better off at 35. But when you're a guy that's fought at 125 and you're fighting a guy that walks around at like 175, I think like Archuleta gets up over 170. I follow them both on Instagram. I like both of them a lot. I'm a big fan. And I know that he's posted pictures of him like at 170 or maybe like 165 or pretty close. So that's like a huge size advantage. I don't know how Juan Archuleta makes 135. Even watching his fight versus PATRICIO PITBULL, I thought that he looked bigger, maybe not in the waist and the legs, but like his shoulders and his frame is humongous. So he's one of the bigger 135 pounders on the roster and even in the world, versus a guy that used to fight at 125. The thing that is interesting to me in this fight is Archuleta kind of bounces around, jumps around, throws unconventional strikes, mixes it well with his takedowns, hits like crazy angles, that TJ Dillashaw training partner, that TJ Dillashaw-esque style, but he makes it his own. And Pettis, his biggest win, I would say, is definitely Joseph Benavidez in the UFC, a fight that a lot of people thought he was going to win. And Benavidez tried to implement that type of style in that fight. He was moving around, doing a lot of stuff like that. And Pettis caught him. He waited and caught him with a cross. And I believe it was a cross, and dropped him and put him down and ended up winning that fight. Later in the rounds, Benavidez came back and was able to outwork Sergio Pettis. That's the one thing that kind of worries me about this fight, and why I would favor Archuleta in this fight is that Pettis has a tendency to wait too much and let people build too much momentum. And Juan Archuleta, when he fought Pitbull said he's like popcorn. He bounces around like popcorn, and he comes at you and he fights the whole time. He comes forward throwing, and he's a very high level wrestler. He wrestled at Purdue and was very successful as a wrestler. So I would favor Archuleta in this fight. Obviously with Sergio Pettis, he's probably watched a Pitbull fight where Pitbull kind of waited for him to come in and counter. So that would be the obvious path to victory for Pettis. I'd love to see these odds. I'll favor Archuleta, but Pettis's best fight was versus a guy that was fighting a lot like Juan Archuleta and was a very high level fighter. Still is a very high level fighter. So this will be an interesting fight to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I do love Sergio Pettis' style, and he's always fun to watch. Like you said, he does get tricky, he gets sneaky, but he also can be too patient sometimes, and just sit on shots and just wait before he does anything. Like he's almost afraid to overcommit sometimes. So it will be interesting. I don't know if the bouncing around will bother Sergio Pettis. I don't think it will, but I do think the wrestling could bother him. I think if Sergio starts to tag Juan a few times and let him know, like, I'm timing you, I'm here, and Juan leans on his wrestling, I think that'll bother Sergio, and that'll be a problem for Sergio. But cardio might be an issue. You mentioned he's tremendous. He's very active. He hasn't really had cardio issues in the past, but with Sergio being as small as he is, I imagine he'll have the speed advantage, and he may implement his own "you can't hit me" bounce around games, game plan and style that could have Juan chasing him. So it will be interesting to see how this one plays out. I'd be curious to see the odds too. I agree with you. I bet Juan Archuleta is going to be like a minus 300 favorite or something to that effect. But I do think it's a little closer. But on paper, Juan's definitely the giant favorite. You mentioned the wrestling, you mentioned the striking, he's looked fantastic. But I do think Sergio's got some tricks. I don't think he'll be intimidated by the moment. I just hope he has that volume and can sort of move around a bit more to try to outspeed and outlast Juan. But it's another fun one. And on that same card, this is the fight I am most looking forward to. And this is Bellator 258. This is on May 7th. And I am absolutely stoked for this fight. Anthony Johnson versus Yoel Romero. I mean, there's a million things to talk about on this. Anthony Johnson hasn't fought in forever. Yoel Romero hasn't looked good in a little while, but he's still amazing. So this is, this is such a tricky fight to pick. I mean, these odds are accurate. It's dead even. And it really, in my opinion, will come down to what Anthony Johnson looks like. We've seen Yoel Romero recently. He looked amazing versus Costa. He lost that decision, but he looked amazing in that fight. He looked like absolute trash versus Adesanya. And trash meaning he did nothing. He wasn't in any real danger. He just did nothing. But Anthony Johnson is a killer that can knock a horse out if he wanted to. And I just don't know what he's been doing for a few years. So what are your thoughts here? How do you think this goes?
Yeah, I mean, there's too many what ifs for this fight to really be confident in. It's like, is Anthony Johnson back because he wants to be back, or is he back because he wants to make money? And that's a big if factor with me. Yoel Romero obviously coming up in weight for this fight, but maybe 205 is a better weight class for him. I know he's fought at 205 in the past, and he was a very different fighter then. Obviously, they're both a little up there in age, but Yoel Romero has been fighting the best guys in the world. I think his last 6 fights were all title fights or first #1 contenders. And on paper, he's the better wrestler, but he's also the smaller man. Anthony Johnson was able to stop Phil Davis's takedowns when they fought. He did get taken down and choked out by DC twice. But DC and Yoel Romero are very different wrestlers. Yoel Romero's takedowns are amazing, but his top control is not as good as someone that comes from a folk style background. So Yoel Romero comes from a freestyle background. And for anyone that doesn't know, freestyle wrestling isn't as big on controlling people once you hit the mat. It's more on big throws and rolling people and exposing the back. So it's a completely different style of wrestling. So it will be harder to hold Anthony Johnson down, especially being a bigger fighter and not having that freestyle wrestling background. Yoel Romero has shown himself in the past to duck his head and throw the overhand. And the one thing that worries me about that is Anthony Johnson's uppercuts. He has one of the most well-timed uppercuts that I have ever seen, and it is super hard, and he has knocked out a lot of people with it. If I were to bet on this fight, I would bet Anthony Johnson's motivated. I've seen things. He looks leaner. He looks in good shape. I would favor him to win this fight. But if he shows up uninspired, Yoel Romero will outwork him and take home the decision. But if I had a bet, I would bet Anthony Johnson wins by maybe finish after an awkward first round.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one to pick. I think I would also pick Anthony Johnson, but literally I have to assume, right, that he's going to be in shape. He's going to be motivated. He's going to be ready to go. I can't assume anything else. And in shape, ready to go. I'm assuming injury free because he's had years to rest. Anthony Johnson will I think he stops Yoel Romero, and I think he stops him like early, second round maybe, because I just think he has too much power, and he's a good wrestler himself. He's no slouch. He's not as accomplished as Yoel Romero is, but he is a very good wrestler.
He might have been a Duke national champ. I know he was definitely an All-American in junior college.
Yeah, and I don't think he's intimidated by the wrestling. You know, he's been in there with some of the best wrestlers on the planet. He's beaten most of them. You know, I don't think he's intimidated by the moment. The big question mark is what the hell's he been doing? But I don't know. I love this fight. I absolutely love this fight. As soon as they announced that this was a potential fight like 2 months ago, I was pumped. So I'm really, really looking forward to this one. I'm curious to see the odds move. I don't think I would bet either guy at these odds, but as this fight comes up, so about, you know, a little over a month away, as this fight comes closer, those odds will shift as money comes in on one fight or another. And I'll be curious to see where that goes, because it may be worth taking either whoever the plus fighter is. But I'm hoping some money comes in on Yoel, so I can throw a little bit on Anthony Johnson as underdog. But either way, this is a really exciting fight, and I'm sure you can tell in my voice. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to the comeback of Anthony Johnson, and I'm looking forward to seeing if Yoel can step it back up. Right, he's had a couple of stand there, do nothing performances. Wasn't tired. We've seen him be an absolute killer in slugfest wars. I just think he needs somebody to bring that to him. And I think Anthony Johnson will. I think he'll come forward, look for the knockout, and he'll bring that out of Yoel. So another very exciting fight, and we'll see what happens. Before you go, check out the description below. In there, we have links to our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and more importantly, to our DraftKings League. Check out the league, join the league, participate in the contests, and as we get going and as you start winning, we're going to start handing out gift cards and participating and doing things like that. So check those out. Every week, there are drops on every fight card. So make sure you check out this channel and our social media on Saturday before the fights start so that you have our most updated lineups and picks.